The blood-red sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Hays City, Kansas, as the three trembling Walker sisters huddled together on the auction platform, their wrists bound with coarse rope that bit into their delicate skin. It was 1873, and the West was still wild, untamed, and often cruel, particularly to women who found themselves alone and unprotected after their father's untimely death. Catherine Walker, the eldest at 23, stood protectively in front of her sisters, her emerald eyes defiant despite the fear that threatened to consume her. Beside her, 20-year-old Elizabeth shivered in the evening chill, while 18-year-old Margaret, the youngest, fought back tears that threatened to spill onto her dirt-smudged cheeks. Next up, the Walker sisters, bellowed the auctioneer, a portly man with yellowed teeth and alcohol on his breath. Three fine specimens of womanhood, fresh from back east. Their daddy left them with nothing but debts, so they're yours for the taking, gentlemen. The crowd of rough-looking men whooped and hollered, the scent of whiskey and unwashed bodies making Catherine's stomach turn. "We'll start with the youngest," the auctioneer continued, roughly grabbing Margaret's arm and pulling her forward. 18 years old, good for bearing children, cooking, and whatever else you might fancy. He laughed crudely and the men joined in. $20, shouted a grizzled miner with a scar across his face. 30, countered a cattle driver missing 3 fingers. Catherine's heart pounded painfully in her chest. Their father had promised them a better life when he moved them west after their mother's death. Instead, his gambling debts had left them destitute, and the bank had seized everything. With no relatives to turn to and no means to support themselves, they'd been swept up by the town's corrupt sheriff who saw an opportunity for profit. $50, called a voice from the back of the crowd. Catherine watched in horror as her sister was sold to the highest bidder, a squat rancher with cruel eyes who leered at Margaret as if she were a prize heifer. "Now for the middle sister," announced the auctioneer, dragging Elizabeth forward. 20 years old, educated enough to raid and gentle as a lamb, the bidding started again, more frenzied this time. Elizabeth went for $70 to a widower with 4 children who needed a new mother for his brood and a warm body for his bed. Catherine steeled herself as the auctioneer turned to her, his grimy hands pawing at her shoulder. And finally, the eldest. 23 might be a bit headstrong, but nothing a firm hand can't fix. The bidding began, but Catherine barely heard it through the rushing of blood in her ears. This couldn't be happening. They were being separated, sold like cattle to men they'd never met, for purposes she couldn't bear to contemplate. $150 for all 3. The voice was deep, clear, and commanded attention. The crowd parted as a tall figure strode forward. Catherine blinked back tears to see a man unlike the others. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but clean. His face, partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, was clean-shaven and strong-jawed. Most striking were his eyes, a penetrating blue that seemed to see right through her. "Owen Blackburn," someone in the crowd murmured. "The rancher from north of town." The auctioneer frowned. "Now, Mr. Blackburn, we're selling them individually, $150 for all 3, Owen repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "That's 50 each, more than fair." "But Mr. Jenkins here already bid 60 for this one, and Mr. Turner bid 70 for the middle one." Owen Blackburn reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. With deliberate slowness, he counted out gold coins onto the auctioneer's table. $200. That should cover any inconveniences. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with greed. "Sold to Mr. Blackburn." A collective groan went up from the crowd, followed by angry mutters. The rancher who had bid on Margaret stepped forward, his hand moving toward the gun at his hip. "Now see here, Blackburn. I suggest you reconsider, Jenkins, Owen said quietly, not reaching for his own weapon but somehow radiating danger nonetheless. It's a fair price and the deal is done. For a tense moment, Catherine thought violence would erupt. Then Jenkins spat on the ground and backed away, followed by the other disappointed bidders. Owen approached the platform, his spurs jingling softly with each step. He took out a knife, and Catherine flinched, but he only used it to cut the ropes binding their wrists. "My wagon is over there," he said, nodding toward a well-maintained wagon hitched to two strong horses. "I'll take you to my ranch." "What? What do you want with us?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Owen's expression remained unreadable. "Nothing you don't want to give. You'll have choices at my ranch. Real choices." Catherine didn't believe him. Men didn't spend $200 without expecting something in return, but they had no alternative and at least they were still together. "Come along," Owen said, helping Margaret down from the platform. "It's a 2-hour ride and night's falling fast." As they walked to the wagon, Catherine noticed the sidearm strapped to Owen's hip and the rifle resting against the wagon seat. He was armed, like most men in these parts, but there was something different about him. He didn't leer or grab. He kept a respectful distance. "You girls can sit in the back," he said, helping each of them up. "There are blankets if you get cold." The wagon bed had been lined with fresh hay and several wool blankets. It was more comfort than Catherine had expected. "Why?" she asked suddenly as Owen prepared to climb onto the driver's seat. "Why buy all three of us? Why not let them sell us separately?" Owen paused, looking back at her with those piercing blue eyes. "Because no person should be sold, and no sisters should be separated." Without further explanation, he climbed up and took the reins. As the wagon pulled away from Hayes City, Catherine huddled with her sisters, all three clinging to each other in the growing darkness. They had been saved from immediate separation, but what awaited them at Owen Blackburn's ranch remained to be seen. "You think he's telling the truth?" Margaret whispered, her young face etched with worry. "About giving us choices?" Catherine squeezed her sister's hand. "I don't know, Maggie. But whatever happens, we'll face it together." The prairie stretched out around them, vast and unforgiving in the moonlight. Ahead lay an uncertain future with a stranger who had spent a small fortune to own them. Behind lay a town that had been willing to sell three sisters to the highest bidders without a second thought. Catherine stared at Owen's broad back as he guided the horses through the darkness. Who was this man, and what did he truly want with three destitute sisters? The Blackburn Ranch came into view after a long, silent journey across the rolling Kansas prairie. In the silver moonlight, Catherine could make out a substantial main house built of sturdy logs, a large barn, several outbuildings, and what appeared to be bunkhouses for ranch hands. It was larger and more prosperous-looking than she had expected. "Home," Owen said simply as he guided the wagon into the yard. A lantern flared to life on the porch of the main house, and an elderly woman stepped out, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. "You're back late, Owen," she called, her voice carrying a slight Irish lilt. "I was beginning to worry." "Had some unexpected business in town, Mrs. Donovan," Owen replied, bringing the wagon to a stop. He jumped down and extended a hand to help the sisters from the wagon bed. The older woman's eyes widened as she took in the three bedraggled young women. "Saints preserve us, what's this then?" "Mrs. Donovan, these are the Walker sisters," Owen explained. "Catherine, Elizabeth, and Margaret. They'll be staying with us. Ladies, this is Mrs. Eileen Donovan, my housekeeper and the best cook west of the Mississippi." Mrs. Donovan's sharp eyes took in their bound wrists, now free but raw and red, their dirty faces streaked with tears, and their rumpled, once fine dresses. Understanding dawned on her weathered face. "Those bastards in town were selling these girls?" she asked, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Owen nodded grimly. "Well then," Mrs. Donovan said, straightening her shoulders, "you poor dears must be exhausted and hungry. Come inside, come inside. I'll heat up some stew and draw baths for all of you." Too tired and confused to resist the motherly care, the sisters followed Mrs. Donovan into the house. Catherine was surprised to find the interior warm and comfortable, with solid furniture, braided rugs on the wooden floors, and oil lamps casting a golden glow over everything. "Owen, you see to the horses while I get these girls settled, Mrs. Donovan instructed, and Owen nodded, heading back outside without argument. "Now then," the housekeeper said, turning to the sisters with kind eyes, "let's get you fed and cleaned up. You're safe here, I promise you that." "How can we be sure?" Catherine asked, still wary. "Mr. Blackburn paid for us. He owns us now." Mrs. Donovan's face softened. "Oh, child, Owen Blackburn isn't the type of man to own people. If he bought you, it was to free you." She shook her head. "But let's talk more after you've had some food and rest. The kitchen's this way." The kitchen was the heart of the house, warm, fragrant, with herbs hanging from the ceiling, and dominated by a large cast iron stove that radiated heat. Mrs. Donovan ladled rich beef stew into bowls and sliced fresh bread, while the sisters sat awkwardly at the table, still trying to process the sudden change in their circumstances. "Eat up," she encouraged. "You'll feel more yourself with food in your bellies." The stew was the first proper meal they'd had in days, and despite their anxiety, the sisters ate eagerly. When they'd finished, Mrs. Donovan showed them to a large bedroom upstairs with a connecting washroom. "I've put all three of you together for tonight, since I imagine you'll want to stay close," she explained, lighting lamps and bustling about. "There's plenty of hot water for baths, and I've set out some clean nightgowns. They might be a bit large, they're Owen's sister's things, but they'll do for now." "Mr. Blackburn has a sister?" Elizabeth asked, speaking up for the first time since they'd arrived. "Had," Mrs. Donovan corrected gently. "Sarah passed 2 winters ago. Influenza. She was only 25. She sighed, then brightened deliberately. "Now you wash up and get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." After she left, the sisters looked at each other in bewilderment. "What do you think is happening?" Margaret asked, her young face confused. "Is this real?" "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "But we're together, and for tonight at least we're safe and warm. Let's clean up and rest and figure things out tomorrow." One by one they bathed in the copper tub, washing away the grime of their ordeal. The nightgowns Mrs. Donovan had provided were indeed too large, but made of soft cotton that felt luxurious against their clean skin. As they settled into the large feather bed, Margaret curled against Catherine like she had as a child. "You think he's really going to give us choices, Kate? Or is this just a nicer cage?" Catherine stroked her sister's hair. "I don't know, Maggie, but whatever comes, we'll face it together, I promise." Elizabeth, always the practical one, was already thinking ahead. "If he truly means to give us freedom, we should plan what to do next. We have no money, no family to turn to." "Tomorrow," Catherine said firmly. "We'll think about all of that tomorrow." Despite her brave words, Catherine lay awake long after her sisters had fallen asleep, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the eaves, and once, the sound of boots on the porch below. Owen Blackburn, perhaps, keeping watch over his strange new acquisition. What did he really want with them? Men in the West didn't spend good money rescuing women out of the goodness of their hearts. There had to be something more to it. Yet Mrs. Donovan seemed genuinely fond of him, and the ranch appeared prosperous and well run. Catherine finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of auction blocks and harsh-voiced men calling out bids for her sisters. Morning came with golden light streaming through curtains that were finer than anything the Walker sisters had seen since leaving Boston 3 years earlier. For a moment, Catherine was disoriented. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up abruptly, waking her sisters. "It's all right," Elizabeth murmured, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "We're at the Blackburn Ranch, remember?" A gentle knock at the door made them all tense. Mrs. Donovan's voice called through. "Are you girls decent? I've brought some clothes that might fit you better than those nightgowns." Catherine opened the door to find the housekeeper carrying an armload of dresses, undergarments, and shoes. "These were Sarah's," Mrs. Donovan explained. "Owen asked me to offer them to you. He thought you might be more comfortable in proper clothes." "That's very kind of him," Catherine said cautiously. "He's a kind man," Mrs. Donovan replied simply. "Breakfast will be ready in half an hour. Take your time getting dressed." She set the clothes on a chair and departed. The sisters sorted through the garments, finding several that would fit each of them with minimal adjustments. Sarah Blackburn had apparently been tall like Catherine, but with a fuller figure closer to Elizabeth's. Margaret, being the smallest, would need to make more significant alterations, but for now she cinched a blue cotton dress tight with its sash. "These are good quality," Elizabeth noted, running her fingers over a green day dress. "Much better than what we've been wearing." Catherine nodded. Their own clothes had grown shabby during the difficult months after their father's death, as they'd sold most of their finer things to pay for food. Dressed in borrowed finery, but with their dignity somewhat restored, the sisters made their way downstairs. They found Mrs. Donovan in the kitchen, frying bacon and flipping hot cakes on the stove. "There you are," she said cheerfully. Sit down, sit down. Owen's already had his breakfast and gone out to check on a new calf, but he said to tell you he'll be back mid-morning to talk with you." "Mrs. Donovan," Catherine began hesitantly as they sat at the table, "can you tell us? What exactly does Mr. Blackburn expect from us? Why did he bring us here?" The older woman turned from the stove, her expression serious. "He expects nothing from you that you're not willing to give, Miss Catherine. As for why," she sighed, "that's for him to explain, but I will say this. Owen Blackburn has seen too much suffering in his life to stand by when he could help." Before Catherine could press further, the back door opened and a young man stepped in, removing his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Donovan. Mr. Blackburn asked me to check if our guests needed." He stopped short at the sight of the three young women at the table, his face flushing. "Daniel Torres, where are your manners?" Mrs. Donovan scolded. "These are the Walker sisters, Catherine, Elizabeth, and Margaret. Ladies, this is Daniel, one of our ranch hands." Daniel, who appeared to be in his early 20s, nodded awkwardly. "Madam, ladies, sorry to intrude. Mr. Blackburn just wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." "We're fine, thank you," Catherine replied formally, noting the young man's respectful demeanor. Another point in favor of the Blackburn Ranch being a decent place at least. "Good, good." Daniel backed toward the door. "I'll let Mr. Blackburn know. He should be back in an hour or so." With a final nod, he departed. Mrs. Donovan chuckled as she set plates of food before them. "That boy's as shy as a newborn colt around pretty women. Good worker, though, and loyal as they come." Breakfast was delicious, thick slices of bacon, fluffy hot cakes with maple syrup, and strong coffee with real cream. The sisters ate hungrily, their spirits lifting with each bite. "Now then, Mrs. Donovan said as she sat down with her own plate, "while we wait for Owen, why don't you tell me a bit about yourselves? Where are you from originally?" The question opened a floodgate. Before long, The sisters were recounting their story, how their father, William Walker, had moved them from Boston after their mother died, promising a fresh start in the West. How his gambling had gradually worsened until he lost everything, including their modest home. How he'd been killed in a bar fight over an unpaid debt just 6 weeks earlier, leaving them with nothing. How the bank had seized what little remained, and the sheriff, seeing an opportunity, had taken them into protective custody only to arrange their sale to the highest bidders. "It's a common enough tale out here," Mrs. Donovan said sadly when they finished. "Too many men come west seeking fortune but find only ruin, and it's usually the women and children who suffer for it." She shook her head. "Well, that's behind you now. Whatever you decide to do next, at least you've got a safe place to catch your breath." "What do you mean, whatever we decide to do next?" Margaret asked. "Don't we belong to Mr. Blackburn now? He paid for us." Mrs. Donovan's face creased with sympathy. "Oh, child. That's not how Owen sees it at all." She leaned forward. "Listen to me. When Owen Blackburn gives his word, it's as good as gold. If he said you'd have choices, then that's exactly what you'll have." Further conversation was interrupted by the sound of boots on the porch. A moment later, Owen Blackburn entered the kitchen, removing his hat as he did so. In the morning light, Catherine could see him clearly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and those striking blue eyes she'd noticed the night before. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt, and there were smile lines at the corners of his eyes, though he wasn't smiling now. "Good morning, ladies," he said, his deep voice filling the kitchen. "I trust you slept well." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Blackburn, and thank you for the loan of the clothes." He nodded, his eyes briefly taking in the sight of the sisters in his sisters' dresses before returning to Catherine's face. "They suit you. Sarah would have been pleased to know they're being worn again." An awkward silence fell. Owen cleared his throat. "I'd like to speak with you all in the parlor if you're finished with breakfast." The sisters exchanged nervous glances but rose and followed him to a comfortable room at the front of the house, furnished with a sofa, several armchairs, and bookshelves lining one wall. "Please sit," Owen said, gesturing to the sofa. He remained standing, seemingly too restless to sit. "Mr. Blackburn," Catherine began, determined to take control of the situation, "we appreciate your intervention yesterday and your hospitality, but we need to understand what you expect from us in return." Owen's expression softened slightly. "Nothing you don't wish to give, Miss Walker." "That's what I meant about choices. With all due respect, sir, men don't spend $200 without expecting something in return," Elizabeth pointed out, her practical nature asserting itself. "You're right about that," Owen conceded, "but what I expect isn't what you might think." He paced to the window, then back. "Let me explain why I was in town yesterday. My foreman quit 2 weeks ago, decided to head to California for the milder winters. I need help running this ranch. It's too much for just me and the boys." "You need workers?" Margaret asked, confused. "I need someone to manage the household accounts, order supplies, handle correspondence. Someone who can read and cipher. The ranch has grown, and there's more paperwork than I can handle alone." He looked at them directly. "I'm offering you jobs, real jobs with fair wages and a safe place to live." The sisters stared at him in shock. "You want to hire us?" Catherine asked slowly. "Yes, you're educated women. Your father may have squandered your inheritance, but he couldn't take away your knowledge." Owen ran a hand through his hair. "I need someone with a good head for numbers to manage the books. Someone to organize the household, plan meals with Mrs. Donovan, keep track of supplies, and someone to help with the garden and the chickens." "But you bought us," Elizabeth said, still skeptical. I prevented you from being sold to men who would have treated you as property, Owen corrected firmly. What I'm offering now is employment, nothing more. You'll be paid fair wages. You can save your money and leave whenever you choose, or you can stay as long as the arrangement benefits both of us. Catherine narrowed her eyes. And where would we live? What would be expected of us beyond these duties? You'd have rooms in this house. As for what's expected, Owen's jaw tightened. Nothing improper, Miss Walker. This is a respectable household. You'd work during the day, same as Mrs. Donovan and the ranch hands. Your evenings would be your own. And if we refuse, Catherine challenged, then I'll give you enough money for stage fare to the nearest city where you might find other employment, and wish you well. Owen's steady gaze never wavered. The choice is yours. All I ask is that you give the arrangement a month's trial before deciding. If after that time you wish to leave, I won't stop you. The sisters exchanged glances, having a silent conversation as only siblings can. May we have some time to discuss this privately? Catherine asked. Of course, Owen nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be in the barn if you have questions. With that, he left, closing the parlor door behind him. As soon as he was gone, Margaret burst out, Do you believe him? Could this really be just about jobs? Elizabeth frowned thoughtfully. It seems too good to be true, but Mrs. Donovan obviously respects him, and this place is well kept. It's not what I'd expect if he had unsavory intentions. What do you think, Kate? Margaret asked, turning to her eldest sister. Catherine stood and paced the room, thinking hard. I don't know. He seemed sincere, but Father seemed sincere about many things too. She sighed. Yet what choice do we have? We have no money, no family to turn to. Even if Mr. Blackburn gave us stage fare as he promised, where would we go? What city would offer 3 young women without references any decent employment? At least here we're together, Elizabeth pointed out. And if it is just work he wants, it sounds like something we could do. I've always been good with numbers. And I do love gardening, Margaret added hopefully. Remember our garden in Boston, Kate? Catherine nodded, remembering the small but beautiful garden their mother had tended before her illness. Margaret had inherited their mother's green thumb. We could try it for the month he suggested, Elizabeth proposed. Save whatever wages he pays us. If anything seems amiss, we'll have some money to leave with. And if he's lying about paying us, Catherine worried, then we're no worse off than we were yesterday, Elizabeth said pragmatically. At least here we have food and shelter while we figure out our next move. After further discussion, the sisters agreed. They would accept Owen Blackburn's offer cautiously and see what came of it. They found Owen in the barn as promised, repairing a broken bridle with practiced ease. He looked up as they entered, setting aside his work. We've decided to accept your offer, Mr. Blackburn, Catherine announced, for a trial period of 1 month, as you suggested. Relief flickered across Owen's face before his expression returned to its usual reserve. Good. You can start tomorrow. Today, rest and get acquainted with the place. He hesitated, then added, I should warn you we're a working ranch. The days start early and can be long, but the work is honest and you'll be treated with respect. What exactly will our duties be? Elizabeth asked. Owen seemed more comfortable discussing practicalities. Miss Elizabeth, if you're good with numbers as your sister mentioned, I'd like you to take over the account books and correspondence. Miss Catherine, I need someone to oversee the household supplies, meal planning with Mrs. Donovan, and general organization. And Miss Margaret, Mrs. Donovan could use help with the kitchen garden and the hen house. And our wages, Catherine pressed. $20 a month each, Owen replied without hesitation. Plus room and board, of course. It's the going rate for skilled help in these parts. Catherine nodded, satisfied. $20 was a fair wage for a woman in 1873, especially with room and board included. They could save most of it. When you feel up to it, I'll show you around the ranch, Owen offered. You should know the place if you're going to be working here. The tour revealed a prosperous, well-managed operation. The main house was substantial, with the kitchen and parlor they'd already seen, a formal dining room, Owen's study, and 4 bedrooms upstairs. Behind the house was a kitchen garden, chicken coop, smokehouse, and wash house. The large barn housed horses, milk cows, and storage for equipment. Beyond were cattle pens, bunkhouses for the ranch hands, and pastures stretching toward the horizon where cattle grazed. "How many acres do you have, Mr. Blackburn?" Elizabeth asked, impressed by the scale of the operation. "Just over 2,000, he replied. "Started with 500 when I came out from Pennsylvania 12 years ago. Been adding to it gradually." "And how many cattle?" Elizabeth continued, her practical mind already calculating. "About 800 head at present. Looking to increase the herd to 1,000 by next year." "That's quite an operation for one man to manage," Catherine observed. Owen's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Hence my need for help. I've got 6 good men working the herd, but I need someone with brains to help manage the business side of things." As they walked back toward the house, Catherine noticed a fenced garden with a small bench beside a flowering rose bush. Unlike the utilitarian kitchen garden, this seemed purely ornamental. "Sarah's garden," Owen said quietly, following her gaze. "My sister loved roses, brought cuttings all the way from Pennsylvania." "It's beautiful," Catherine said, sensing the depth of feeling behind his simple statement. "Your sister must have been a remarkable woman." "She was," Owen agreed, his voice roughening slightly. "She kept me human during the war and after, when it would have been easy to forget." The personal revelation, brief as it was, humanized Owen Blackburn more than anything else had. Catherine found herself wondering about his past. What experiences had shaped him into the man who would spend $200 to rescue 3 strangers from a degrading auction? By the time they returned to the house, the sisters had a better understanding of the ranch and what their roles would entail. It was a substantial operation, clearly profitable, and well organized, though Owen was right that it needed more management than one man could provide. "I'll leave you to settle in," Owen said as they reached the porch. "Mrs. Donovan will show you which rooms will be yours. We typically have dinner at 6. With a nod, he strode off toward the barn, where one of the ranch hands was calling for him. Mrs. Donovan was waiting inside, eager to show them their permanent rooms. Unlike the shared bedroom of the previous night, each sister would have her own room, a luxury they hadn't experienced since Boston. "These were guest rooms," Mrs. Donovan explained, "though we rarely have visitors this far out. They just needed airing and fresh linens." The rooms were simple but comfortable, each with a bed, dresser, washstand, and chair. Catherine's room had a small writing desk beside the window, which overlooked the prairie stretching away to the east. Elizabeth's room faced the barn and corrals, practical for someone who would be involved in the ranch's business. Margaret's smaller room had a view of the garden she would help tend. "I've put some more of Sarah's clothes in the dressers," Mrs. Donovan said. "You're welcome to alter them to fit. Owen said to tell you that when the freight wagon comes next week, you can order fabric to make new things if you prefer." "Mrs. Donovan," Catherine said carefully once they were alone in her room, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course, dear." "How long have you worked for Mr. Blackburn?" "Going on 8 years now," the older woman replied. "Came out after my Patrick died. My daughter had married a man from these parts, you see, but she died in childbirth the year before. I wanted to be near my grandson." Her eyes grew sad. But my son-in-law took the boy and moved to Oregon not long after I arrived. Owen was kind enough to keep me on anyway. And in all that time, Catherine pressed, has Mr. Blackburn always been honorable in his dealings with women? Mrs. Donovan's expression softened with understanding. You're right to be cautious, Miss Catherine, after what you've been through. But yes, Owen Blackburn is an honorable man. He treats everyone fairly, men and women alike. She patted Catherine's hand. I won't say he's a saint. He's been known to enjoy a drink in town now and then, and he's got a temper when roused. But he's never raised a hand to a woman or taken advantage of one. His sister Sarah saw to that. She had a strong influence on him. She practically raised him after their parents died. She was 4 years older and, according to Owen, twice as wise. Mrs. Donovan smiled at the memory. When they came here, she ran the household while he built the ranch. Her death hit him hard. He's been quieter since then, more closed off. The information helped Catherine begin to form a clearer picture of Owen Blackburn. A man shaped by war and loss, but also by a sister's love and guidance. A man who, perhaps, saw something of his own sister's vulnerability in 3 young women being auctioned off to strangers. That evening, dinner was a simple but hearty affair: roast beef, potatoes, green beans from the garden, and apple pie for dessert. Owen ate quickly, asking a few polite questions about whether they'd found everything they needed, but otherwise maintaining his reserve. After the meal, he excused himself to check on a horse that had been favoring its left foreleg. He's not much for conversation, Elizabeth observed once he'd gone. Never has been, Mrs. Donovan confirmed as she cleared the plates. But he listens well, and he remembers everything you tell him. In the days that followed, the sisters settled into their new roles at the Blackburn Ranch. Elizabeth took to the account books with enthusiasm, discovering an aptitude for business that surprised even her. Catherine found satisfaction in bringing order to the household management, creating systems for tracking supplies and planning menus with Mrs. Donovan. Margaret blossomed in the gardens and spent happy hours with the chickens, who she claimed each had distinct personalities. Owen was true to his word about their duties and their freedom. They worked during the day but had evenings to themselves. They were paid promptly at the end of their first week, $5 each, which they carefully stored away. No improper demands were made, no liberties taken. Owen himself was often absent during the day, working with the cattle or riding the boundaries of his property, but he joined them for dinner each evening. Gradually, Catherine's wariness began to ease. The ranch was a good place, the work satisfying, and for the first time since their father's death, she and her sisters were safe, well fed, and treated with respect. It was during the second week that Catherine began to notice something changing in Owen's demeanor, at least toward her. He sought her out more frequently to discuss household matters, lingering in conversation longer than strictly necessary. Once, she caught him watching her as she arranged wildflowers in a vase, a strange expression on his face that he quickly masked when she looked up. "Mr. Blackburn seems to value your opinion," Elizabeth commented one evening as they sat on the porch, enjoying the cool air after a warm day. "He asked me today if I'd shown you the projection for next year's cattle sales." "Did he?" Catherine tried to sound nonchalant. "I'm sure he just wants both of us to be informed about the ranch's finances." Elizabeth gave her a knowing look but didn't press the issue. The next day, Catherine was inventorying the pantry when Owen appeared in the doorway. "Miss Walker, do you have a moment?" he asked. "Of course, Mr. Blackburn." She set down her pencil and list. "What can I help you with?" "I need to ride into Hays City tomorrow for supplies. I was wondering if you might like to accompany me. There are some household items that Mrs. Donovan mentioned needing, and you might want to select them yourself. Catherine hesitated. The prospect of returning to the town where they had nearly been sold was unsettling. Yet part of her was curious to see how it would feel to return there as an employed woman rather than as merchandise. "Will it be safe?" she asked carefully, understanding darkened Owen's eyes. "I wouldn't suggest it if I thought otherwise. Sheriff Miller was relieved of his duties last week. Seems the county marshal got wind of his auctions and took exception. The new sheriff's a decent man." He paused. "But if you'd rather not go, I understand completely." "No, I'll come," Catherine decided. "As you said, there are supplies to select." Owen nodded, seemingly pleased. "We'll leave after breakfast, around 8. It's a 2-hour ride each way, so we should be back by late afternoon." After he left, Catherine wondered if she'd made the right decision. Being alone with Owen Blackburn for hours was something she hadn't anticipated when accepting employment at his ranch. Not that she feared him, those concerns had largely dissipated, but there was something in the way he sometimes looked at her that made her pulse quicken. When she told her sisters about the planned trip, their reactions were mixed. Margaret was concerned, while Elizabeth was thoughtful. "It makes sense for you to go," Elizabeth said pragmatically. "You're in charge of the household supplies after all." "But it's Hayes City," Margaret protested. "After what happened there, things are different now," Catherine assured her. "Mr. Blackburn says the sheriff who arranged our auction has been removed." "Just be careful, Kate," Margaret pleaded. "We need you." "I'll be perfectly fine," Catherine promised. "Mr. Blackburn has proven himself trustworthy so far." That night, Catherine lay awake longer than usual, her mind turning over the upcoming journey. It would be her first time away from the ranch and from her sisters since their arrival. The thought made her both nervous and strangely excited. The morning dawned clear and mild, perfect for traveling. Catherine dressed in one of Sarah's dresses that she'd altered a practical brown calico with white trim and tied her dark hair back with a ribbon. When she came downstairs, Owen was already at the table, drinking coffee and studying a list. "Good morning, Miss Walker," he greeted her, standing briefly as she entered the kitchen. "I hope you slept well." "Well enough, thank you," she replied, accepting the cup of coffee Mrs. Donovan handed her. Breakfast was quick eggs, bacon, and biscuits eaten mostly in silence. Owen seemed preoccupied, though he made polite conversation about the weather and the supplies they needed to purchase. After breakfast, he brought the wagon around while Catherine said goodbye to her sisters, promising to be back by dinner time. She took her place on the wagon seat beside Owen, conscious of his solid presence next to her. "Ready?" he asked, glancing down at her. "Yes," she answered, squaring her shoulders. The journey to Hayes City was filled with a strange mixture of tension and companionable silence. Owen pointed out landmarks along the way: a creek where he watered the cattle during dry spells, a stand of trees where wild berries grew in summer, a distant hill where he'd once tracked a mountain lion that had been preying on his calves. Catherine found herself relaxing as they traveled, drawn into conversation more easily than she'd expected. Away from the ranch, Owen seemed less the stern employer and more simply a man, one with a dry sense of humor that occasionally surfaced, and a deep knowledge of the land he'd claimed as his own. "How did you come to settle here?" she asked as the wagon rolled steadily across the prairie. "Mrs. Donovan mentioned you came from Pennsylvania originally." Owen was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he might not answer. Then he said, "After the war, I couldn't go back to Pennsylvania. Too many ghosts. I headed west with Sarah, looking for somewhere to start fresh." His hands tightened slightly on the reins. "Kansas was still wild then, but the land was good and the price was right. We staked our claim, built the house, bought our first herd. Sarah kept us going through those early years. You were in the war." Catherine asked gently, sensing this was a difficult topic. "Union cavalry." His voice was clipped. 4 years that felt like 40. Catherine didn't press for more. Her own father had avoided service due to a childhood injury that left him with a slight limp, but she'd seen returning soldiers in Boston, men with empty sleeves and haunted eyes who jumped at sudden noises. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said instead. "Mrs. Donovan speaks very highly of her." A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Sarah was the best of us, stubborn as a mule, mind you, but with a heart as big as the sky." He glanced at Catherine. "She would have liked you, all three of you, but especially you, why me in particular? You have the same protective instinct when it comes to your sisters. Sarah was the same way with me, especially after our parents died, always looking out for me, even when I didn't want her to." His expression softened with memory. "Even arranged my first dance with a girl at a church social. I was 15 and too shy to ask anyone myself." The glimpse into young Owen Blackburn, shy and needing his sister's help to dance with a girl, was endearing and unexpectedly humanizing. Catherine found herself smiling. "What?" Owen asked, catching her expression. "I'm just trying to imagine you as a shy 15-year-old, she admitted. "It's difficult to reconcile with the man who faced down an entire town to buy 3 women he didn't know." Something flickered in Owen's eyes, a deeper emotion quickly controlled. "People change, Miss Walker. War changes them fastest of all." Before Catherine could respond, Hayes City came into view ahead of them, its buildings stark against the prairie. Her smile faded as memories of the auction platform and leering faces rushed back. Owen seemed to sense her discomfort. "We don't have to go in if you'd rather not," he said quietly. "I can handle the supplies alone." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "No, I won't let fear rule me. Besides, I need to select the household items as we planned." Owen nodded, respect evident in his glance. "As you wish." Hayes City by daylight was less intimidating than Catherine remembered. The main street was bustling with normal activity: women shopping, men conducting business, children playing. No auction platform stood in the town square now. Owen drove directly to the general store, helping Catherine down from the wagon with strong, steady hands. "Stay close," he said, his voice low. "Most folks here are decent enough, but there's always a few troublemakers." The general store was large and well-stocked. The proprietor, Mr. Jenkins, greeted Owen warmly. "Mr. Blackburn, good to see you. Been a while since you came to town yourself instead of sending one of your boys." His curious gaze shifted to Catherine. "And who might this lovely lady be?" "Miss Catherine Walker, my new housekeeper," Owen replied with a formality that established her position clearly. "Miss Walker, this is Harold Jenkins, owner of the finest establishment in Hayes City." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Jenkins," Catherine said politely. "Likewise, Miss Walker." Jenkins smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Any friend of Owen Blackburn's is welcome here. What can I help you folks with today?" As Owen handed over his list of supplies, Catherine wandered the store, selecting the household items they needed: lamp oil, flour, sugar, coffee, fabric for new curtains in the parlor, and thread for mending. She was examining some hair ribbons when she became aware of whispers nearby. "That's one of them Walker girls," a woman's voice said softly. "The one Sheriff Miller tried to auction off last month." "No," another woman gasped. "Well, I always said Miller was crooked as a dog's hind leg. I heard the new sheriff ran him clean out of the county. Good riddance, I say. Selling women like cattle." In this day and age, Catherine kept her eyes on the ribbons, her cheeks burning. She'd known returning to Hayes City might mean facing gossip, but the reality was still uncomfortable. "Don't mind them," a quiet voice said beside her. Catherine turned to see a young woman about her own age with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "People talk because they have nothing better to do." "Thank you," Catherine replied, grateful for the unexpected support. "I'm Clara Turner, the schoolteacher," the young woman introduced herself. "You must be Miss Walker. Mr. Blackburn mentioned he'd hired you when I saw him last week at church." "Yes, I'm Catherine Walker." She was surprised to learn that Owen attended church, though she shouldn't have been. Many ranchers maintained religious observances even on the frontier. "How are you finding life at the Blackburn Ranch?" Clara asked. "It's not what I expected," Catherine admitted, "but in a good way." Clara smiled knowingly. "Owen Blackburn has a reputation for being stern and solitary, but those who know him understand he's a good man at heart. The children adore him when he comes to the schoolhouse to fix things, though he pretends not to notice." The image of Owen surrounded by admiring children was another piece of the puzzle that was the rancher. Before Catherine could ask more, Owen himself approached, his arms laden with packages. "Miss Turner," he greeted the schoolteacher with a nod. "I trust the new blackboard is holding up well." "Perfectly, Mr. Blackburn. Thank you again for installing it." Owen turned to Catherine. "I've settled the bill, Miss Walker. Have you found everything you need?" Catherine held up her basket of selected items. "Yes, thank you. It was lovely to meet you, Miss Walker," Clara said warmly. "Perhaps you'll join us for church on Sunday. Mr. Blackburn could bring you and your sisters." "Perhaps," Catherine replied noncommittally, glancing at Owen. "We should be going," Owen said, his expression unreadable. "Good day, Miss Turner." Outside, as Owen loaded their purchases into the wagon, Catherine asked, "Do you regularly attend church in town, Mr. Blackburn?" He secured a sack of flour before answering. "When weather and work permit." It was important to Sarah. He straightened, meeting her gaze. "Would you and your sisters like to attend this Sunday? It's a long ride, but the congregation is welcoming." "I think we would," Catherine decided. After weeks at the ranch, it would be good to meet other people, particularly women like Clara Turner, who seemed friendly and intelligent. Their next stop was the saddlery, where Owen needed to order a new saddle for one of his hands. As he discussed specifics with the saddle maker, Catherine wandered to the front of the shop, looking out at the street. A man staggered out of the saloon across the way, clearly drunk despite the early hour. His bleary gaze fell on Catherine, and a look of recognition crossed his face. "Well, if it ain't one of them Walker girls," he slurred loudly. "The one that went to Blackburn." Catherine stepped back from the window, but the man had already started across the street, calling out, "Hey, pretty lady. Blackburn paid good money for you, but I bet you'd have been more fun in my bed." Before Catherine could retreat further, Owen was beside her, his expression thunderous. He stepped outside to confront the drunk, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "Go home, Matheson," Owen said, his voice deadly quiet. "You're drunk." "Just mackin' conversation with the lady," Matheson protested, swaying on his feet. "Ain't no law against that." "There's a law against public drunkenness," a new voice interrupted. A man wearing a sheriff's badge approached, his hand also near his gun, "and against harassing respectable women." "Aw, Sheriff Davis, I didn't mean nothin' by it," Matheson whined. "Go sleep it off," Davis ordered. "Now, before I decide the jail cell needs an occupant." Matheson slouched away, muttering under his breath. "Sorry about that, Mr. Blackburn, Miss Walker," the sheriff said, tipping his hat to Catherine. "Some men don't know when to keep their mouths shut." "Thank you, Sheriff," Owen replied, his tense posture easing slightly. "Miss Walker is my housekeeper, here to select supplies for the ranch." Sheriff Davis's eyes showed understanding but no judgment. "Well, you're welcome in Hays City, Miss Walker. If anyone gives you trouble, you let me know." After the sheriff departed, Owen turned to Catherine, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she assured him, though her heart was still racing. "It was just words. Words can cut deeper than knives sometimes." Owen's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry you had to experience that. Perhaps coming to town was a mistake." "No," Catherine said firmly. "I won't hide away because of men like Matheson. Besides, I met Miss Turner, who seems like a potential friend." Admiration flickered in Owen's eyes. "You have courage, Miss Walker." "I've had to," she replied simply. Their remaining errands went smoothly, and they were soon headed back to the ranch, the wagon loaded with supplies. The encounter with Matheson had cast a shadow over the outing, but Catherine refused to let it dominate her thoughts. Instead, she found herself reflecting on the other aspects of the day, meeting Clara Turner, learning more about Owen through his interactions with the townspeople, and the surprising comfort she felt in his presence. "Miss Walker," Owen said suddenly as they rolled across the open prairie, "I want to apologize again for what happened in town." "It wasn't your fault," Catherine replied. "Some men will always be crude, especially when drinking. Still, I brought you to town and you were subjected to that comment because of your association with me." His jaw tightened. "I want you to know that I don't. That is, I never intended for people to think." He was struggling, and Catherine realized with surprise that the normally composed Owen Blackburn was embarrassed. "Mr. Blackburn," she said gently, "I understand that you hired me as your housekeeper, nothing more. If some people assume otherwise because of how I came to be at your ranch, that's their small-mindedness, not a reflection on you or me." Owen glanced at her, relief evident in his eyes. "Thank you for understanding. I wouldn't want you or your sisters to feel uncomfortable with the arrangement." "We don't," Catherine assured him. After a moment's hesitation, she added, "In fact, we're grateful, not just for the rescue, but for the opportunity to work, to be independent." "You're doing good work," Owen said, his voice warming. "All three of you. Elizabeth has a real head for business. She caught an error in the cattle count that would have cost me $50. She's always been clever with numbers," Catherine said proudly. "And Margaret has such a way with growing things. Have you seen what she's done with the kitchen garden?" "I have," Owen confirmed. "Mrs. Donovan says we'll have the best vegetable crop in years thanks to her care." The conversation flowed more easily after that, focusing on the ranch and its operations. By the time they approached the long drive leading to the house, Catherine realized she had enjoyed the day, despite the unpleasant encounter in town. More surprisingly, she had enjoyed Owen Blackburn's company. As he helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong at her waist, their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them, a moment of connection that left Catherine slightly breathless. "Thank you for accompanying me today, Miss Walker," Owen said formally, though his eyes remained warm. "Your assistance was invaluable." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Blackburn," she replied, equally formal. The moment stretched between them until the front door opened and Margaret came running out. "Kate, you're back. How was town? Did you get the fabric for new curtains? Were people terrible?" Her questions tumbled out in a rush of excitement and concern. Catherine laughed, the tension broken. "Yes to the fabric, and no, people weren't terrible. I'll tell you all about it inside." As Margaret led her away, Catherine glanced back to see Owen watching them, a slight smile softening his features before he turned to unload the wagon. That night, as she prepared for bed, Catherine found herself thinking about Owen Blackburn not as her employer, but as a man. A man who had fought in the Civil War, who had been shaped by loss and hardship, who fixed blackboards for the local school and attended church because it had been important to his sister. A man who had faced down a drunk to protect her reputation, and who had been genuinely concerned that she might think he had improper expectations. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Catherine allowed herself to acknowledge the truth. She was attracted to Owen Blackburn. And if she wasn't mistaken, he was attracted to her as well. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Catherine had never considered romance a possibility in her current circumstances. After their father's death, her focus had been entirely on survival for herself and her sisters. Even after coming to the ranch, she had been too wary, too focused on independence to consider anything more. But now she found herself wondering what it might be like to see that warmth in Owen's eyes directed at her not as his housekeeper, but as a woman he admired. What it might be like to feel his strong hands on her waist in a context other than helping her down from a wagon. "Don't be foolish," she whispered to herself in the darkness. "He's your employer, nothing more." Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was Owen's rare smile that followed her into dreams. The next few weeks brought a new rhythm to life at the Blackburn Ranch. True to their word, the sisters attended church in Hays City that Sunday, where they were welcomed by Clara Turner and many other members of the congregation. Catherine was relieved to find that most people treated them with kindness and respect, either unaware of or choosing to ignore the circumstances of their arrival. Elizabeth quickly became absorbed in the ranch accounts, showing a natural talent for business that impressed even Owen. She discovered several areas where efficiency could be improved and costs reduced, presenting her findings with clear-headed practicality that earned Owen's trust and respect. Margaret blossomed under Mrs. Donovan's guidance, her natural affinity for growing things transforming the kitchen garden into a flourishing source of fresh vegetables. She also took charge of the henhouse, increasing egg production through better care of the chickens. Catherine managed the household with efficient grace, establishing systems for everything from meal planning to supply inventories. She worked closely with Mrs. Donovan, learning the older woman's recipes and household wisdom while bringing her own organizational skills to bear. Through it all, something subtle was changing between Catherine and Owen. Their professional relationship remained proper, but there were moments a lingering glance across the dinner table, fingers brushing as he handed her a ledger, a shared smile when Margaret's favorite hen escaped, and led them all on a merry chase around the yard that suggested deeper feelings developing on both sides. Owen began finding reasons to seek Catherine's company beyond strictly household matters. He asked her opinion on books from his library, invited her to view a new calf born in the barn, sought her advice on what flowers to plant in Sarah's garden. Catherine, in turn, found herself looking forward to their encounters, her pulse quickening whenever she heard his boots on the porch or his deep voice calling her name. It was during the 4th week of their employment that the situation shifted decisively. A violent thunderstorm struck the ranch just after dinner, wind and rain lashing the buildings with unexpected fury. Owen and the ranch hands raced to secure animals and equipment, while Mrs. Donovan and the sisters hurried to close windows and place buckets under several leaks in the roof. Catherine was struggling to close a stubborn window in the upstairs hallway when Owen appeared, soaked from his dash from the barn. "Let me help," he said, reaching past her to force the swollen wood into place. The sudden proximity, his chest nearly touching her back, his arms bracketing her against the windowsill, sent a jolt of awareness through Catherine. "Thank you," she managed, turning to face him. Owen didn't step back immediately. Water dripped from his hair onto his face, and without thinking, Catherine reached up to brush it away. The moment her fingers touched his cheek, something electric passed between them. Owen's breath caught and his eyes darkened. For a heartbeat, Catherine thought he might kiss her. Then a tremendous crash of thunder rattled the house, breaking the spell. Owen stepped back, his expression unreadable. "I should check the other windows," he said, his voice rough. "Of course," Catherine replied, flustered by her own boldness and the intensity of the moment. Later that night, after the storm had passed and the household had retired, Catherine sat at the small desk in her room, unable to sleep. The almost moment with Owen replayed in her mind, leaving her restless and confused. Was she imagining his interest? Was her own attraction clouding her judgment? A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it, she found Elizabeth standing there in her nightgown, a serious expression on her face. "May I come in?" her sister asked. "Of course." Catherine stepped aside, closing the door behind Elizabeth. "Is something wrong?" Elizabeth sat on the edge of the bed, studying Catherine with knowing eyes. "I think we need to talk about Mr. Blackburn." Catherine's heart skipped. "What about him?" "About the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching," Elizabeth said directly. "And the way you look at him." Heat rushed to Catherine's cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Kate," Elizabeth said gently, "I've known you my entire life. I can tell when you're developing feelings for someone." Catherine sank onto the chair by her desk. "Is it that obvious? To me, yes. To Margaret, perhaps not yet. To Mrs. Donovan, well, I've seen her hiding a smile when you two are in the same room." Elizabeth leaned forward. "The question is, what do you intend to do about it?" "Do?" Catherine shook her head. "There's nothing to do. He's our employer." "He's a good man who clearly admires you," Elizabeth countered. "And our contract month is almost up. We'll soon be employees by choice, not necessity. Even so, it would be inappropriate." Elizabeth's expression softened. "Kate, you've spent so long taking care of Maggie and me that you've never allowed yourself to think of your own happiness. Maybe it's time you did." "My happiness includes ensuring you and Maggie are safe and secure," Catherine insisted. "And we are," Elizabeth pointed out. "We have jobs, we're saving money, we're building skills that could support us anywhere. You don't need to sacrifice your chance at love for us anymore." Love. The word hung in the air between them. Was that what she felt for Owen Blackburn? It seemed impossible after such a short time, and yet. "I don't even know if he feels the same way," Catherine said quietly. Elizabeth laughed softly. "Then you're the only one who doesn't. Mrs. Donovan told me she hasn't seen him this alive since before his sister died." The conversation with Elizabeth left Catherine with much to consider. If her feelings for Owen were as transparent as her sister suggested, and if he truly returned them, what then? Could she allow herself to explore a relationship that went beyond employer and employee? Could she trust that his intentions were honorable? The opportunity to find out came sooner than she expected. The day after the storm, Owen asked Catherine to accompany him on a ride to check a section of fence that might have been damaged by the high winds. Elizabeth could go, Catherine suggested, though her heart leaped at the prospect of time alone with him. "I need your eye for detail," Owen replied, a slight smile softening his usually serious expression. Elizabeth would be calculating the cost of repairs before we even assess the damage. It was a fair observation about her practical sister, and Catherine found herself agreeing. An hour later, they were riding side by side across the open prairie, Catherine on a gentle mare Owen had selected for her, Owen on his favored stallion. The day was glorious after the storm, clear blue skies, fresh air filled with the scent of rain-washed grass, wildflowers dotting the landscape with splashes of color. Catherine felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. "You ride well," Owen observed as they crested a small rise. "My father insisted we learn," Catherine replied. "He said it was a necessary skill, even for young ladies." He was right about that at least, Owen said, a hint of disapproval in his tone when referencing her father. He wasn't always a bad man, Catherine felt compelled to explain. Before my mother died, he was different, attentive, responsible. Her illness changed him, or perhaps it just revealed weaknesses that had always been there. Owen considered this. Grief affects people differently. Some find strength they never knew they had. Others collapse under the weight of it. Like you and your sister, Catherine observed. You both came west after the war, built something new from nothing. That took strength. Sarah was the strong one, Owen said quietly. I was lost after the war. The things I'd seen, the things I'd done. He shook his head. Sarah refused to let me surrender to darkness. She practically dragged me west, insisted we build the ranch, forced me to focus on the future instead of the past. She sounds remarkable, Catherine said, moved by this glimpse into his past. She was. Owen's expression softened with memory. I think that's why I couldn't stand by when I saw you and your sisters on that auction block. It felt like a desecration of everything Sarah believed in, the dignity of every person, the special bond between siblings. They had reached the section of fence that needed inspection. Owen dismounted and tied his horse to a post, then came to help Catherine down. His hands at her waist were firm but gentle, and he held her a moment longer than necessary once her feet touched the ground. Thank you, Catherine said softly, looking up into his face, now just inches from her own. Catherine, Owen began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. It was the first time he had used her given name rather than the formal Miss Walker, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her. Yes, she encouraged when he remained silent. I've been wanting to speak with you, he finally said, stepping back slightly but maintaining eye contact. About your future, yours and your sister's. Catherine's heart sank a little. This was to be a business conversation after all. The month's trial period is nearly up, Owen continued. I want you to know that I hope you'll all stay on. Your work has been exemplary, and the ranch is running more smoothly than it has since Sarah. He cleared his throat. But I understand if you wish to move on. Now that you have some savings and references, I'd be happy to provide. We haven't discussed leaving, Catherine assured him. I believe we're all content here. Relief crossed Owen's face. I'm glad to hear it. Very glad. They turned their attention to the fence, which had indeed suffered damage in the storm. Several posts had been loosened by the saturated ground, and a section of wire had come loose. Owen made notes of the repairs needed, planning to send some of the hands out the next day. As they prepared to return to the ranch, Owen suddenly turned to Catherine, determination in his eyes. There's something else I wanted to say, he began, his voice deeper than usual. Something not related to your employment. Catherine's pulse quickened. Yes, I find myself thinking about you, Owen admitted, the words coming with difficulty. Not as my housekeeper, but as a woman I admire greatly, a woman whose courage and intelligence I respect. A woman whose company I've come to value above all others. Catherine's breath caught. Mr. Blackburn, Owen, he corrected gently. If we're speaking of personal matters, I'd prefer you use my given name. Owen, Catherine repeated, the name feeling intimate on her lips. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, he assured her quickly. I don't expect anything from you. I wanted you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond what's appropriate for an employer. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'll understand completely if you wish to leave the ranch. Leave? Catherine shook her head, finding her voice. No, that's not. I mean, I've been having similar thoughts about you. Hope blazed in Owen's eyes. You have? Yes, she admitted, a weight lifting as she finally voiced her feelings. I admire you too, your integrity, your kindness to my sisters and me, the life you've built here. Owen took a step closer, reaching out to take her hand. His touch was warm, his calloused palm a reminder of the physical labor that had built his ranch. "Catherine," he said softly, "I know this is sudden, and I know your circumstances when you came here were difficult. I don't want to take advantage of that. If you need time—" "I don't need time," Catherine interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "What I needed was to know that you felt the same way." The smile that transformed Owen's face made him look years younger, erasing the serious lines around his eyes. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Catherine had been kissed before a few times by boys in Boston, at socials under the watchful eyes of chaperones. But this was different. This was a man, not a boy, and his kiss spoke of restrained passion and deep feeling that made her dizzy with its intensity. When they finally broke apart, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" Catherine asked, breathless. "I needed to be sure you were staying because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated." His expression grew serious. "I never want you to feel trapped, Catherine. Not by circumstances, not by gratitude, and certainly not by me." The consideration behind his words touched her deeply. This was a man who understood power and its potential for abuse, who had waited to speak his feelings until she was truly free to accept or reject them. "I'm staying because I want to," she assured him, "because I've found something here I never expected to find." "And what's that?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "A place where I belong," Catherine said simply, "and someone I might belong with." Owen's smile returned, more tender now. "I feel the same way." He glanced at the sun's position. "We should head back. Your sisters will worry if we're gone too long." As they rode back to the ranch, side by side in companionable silence, Catherine felt as though her world had shifted on its axis. Just weeks ago, she had been standing on an auction block, facing a future of servitude and despair. Now she rode freely across land that had become dear to her, beside a man who had awakened feelings she had never expected to experience. There was much still to discuss: how to tell her sisters, what this meant for her position at the ranch, how their relationship might progress, but for now, Catherine was content to simply experience the joy of newfound love. As they approached the ranch, Owen reined his horse closer to hers. "Catherine," he said quietly, "I want to court you properly, with your sister's blessing and in a way that respects your position and independence. Would you allow that?" The formal request, so characteristic of Owen's old-fashioned sense of honor, warmed Catherine's heart. "Yes," she replied, her smile as bright as the prairie sky above them. "I would like that very much." The following Sunday, Owen escorted all three Walker sisters to church in Hays City, but anyone observing closely would have noticed that his attention was particularly focused on Catherine. They sat together in the pew, their shoulders occasionally touching, exchanging glances during the sermon that spoke volumes without a word being said. After the service, as the congregation gathered outside to socialize, Clara Turner approached Catherine with a knowing smile. "It seems congratulations might be in order," she said quietly, nodding toward Owen, who was deep in conversation with the minister but whose eyes kept straying to Catherine. Catherine blushed. "Nothing's official yet. But something has changed," Clara observed. "I'm happy for you both. Owen Blackburn has been alone too long, and you deserve happiness after everything you've been through." Word spread quickly, as it always does in small communities. By the time they returned to the ranch, Mrs. Donovan was waiting with a special dinner, and a twinkle in her eye that suggested she, too, had anticipated this development. That evening, after dinner, Catherine sat with her sisters in the parlor while Owen finished some work in his study. "I suppose you've both noticed that things have changed between Mr. Blackburn and me," she began hesitantly. "Owen, you mean," Elizabeth corrected with a smile. "And yes, we'd have to be blind not to notice." "Are you in love with him, Kate?" Margaret asked directly, her young face serious. Catherine considered the question carefully. "I'm developing strong feelings for him," she admitted. "Whether it's love yet, I'm not certain, but I believe it could become that." "And does he feel the same?" Elizabeth inquired, practical as always. "He says he does," Catherine replied, warmth spreading through her at the memory of Owen's words. "He's asked to court me properly with your blessing." Margaret clapped her hands in delight. "How wonderful! Of course he has our blessing." Elizabeth was more measured. "What would this mean for your position here? For all our positions?" "That's something we still need to discuss," Catherine acknowledged. "But Owen is adamant that you both are welcome at the ranch regardless. Your jobs are secure." "And if you were to marry him someday?" Elizabeth pressed. The possibility sent a thrill through Catherine. "Then I suppose I would be mistress of the ranch rather than its housekeeper, but that's far in the future if it happens at all." "I think it will," Margaret said confidently. "I've seen the way he looks at you, Kate. Like you're the sun rising after a long, dark night." The poetic observation from her youngest sister surprised Catherine. "When did you become so perceptive about matters of the heart?" Margaret smiled enigmatically. "I notice things, especially when they concern people I love." The courtship between Catherine and Owen progressed with proper decorum but undeniable passion. He brought her wildflowers picked from the prairie, read poetry with her in the evenings, and took her on long rides across his land, sharing his dreams for its future. Catherine, in turn, opened up about her life before coming west, her childhood in Boston, her mother's long illness, her father's decline into gambling and drink. 2 months after their first kiss, on a clear autumn evening as they walked in Sarah's garden, Owen stopped beside the blooming roses and took both of Catherine's hands in his. "Catherine," he began, his voice deeper than usual with emotion, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light back to this ranch and to my heart." Catherine squeezed his hands, emotion welling up inside her. "You've given me something I never thought I'd find after our father died: security, purpose, and most importantly, love." "I want to give you more," Owen said earnestly. "I want to give you everything I have: my name, my ranch, my future." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. From it, he produced a ring, a delicate gold band set with a modest diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Sarah kept it for me, said I should give it to the woman who would be my partner in all things." He sank to one knee, still holding her hand. "Catherine Walker, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to anticipate this moment, the reality of it, Owen kneeling before her, offering his mother's ring and his heart, brought tears to Catherine's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." His face lit with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their future together. When they finally separated, breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Catherine. More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, the words feeling right and true, "with all my heart." They shared their news with the household that evening. Elizabeth offered sincere congratulations while Margaret wept happy tears and hugged them both. Mrs. Donovan dabbed at her eyes with her apron, declaring that Sarah would have been overjoyed to see this day. Plans were made for a Christmas wedding, giving them 3 months to prepare. Catherine and Owen agreed that Elizabeth and Margaret would continue in their positions for as long as they wished, though as Catherine's sisters, they would now be family, not employees. "You'll always have a home here," Owen assured them. "Whether you choose to stay on in your current roles or pursue other paths." The following Sunday, their engagement was announced in church, leading to a flood of well wishes from the community. Clara Turner embraced Catherine warmly, while Sheriff Davis congratulated Owen with a hearty handshake. Even Mr. Jenkins from the general store presented them with a gift, a fine set of china cups he'd been saving for a special customer. As the wedding day approached, Catherine found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. The tragedy of her father's death, the horror of the auction block, the uncertainty of going to a stranger's ranch all had led, somehow, to the greatest happiness she had ever known. "You ever think about how we came to be here?" she asked her sisters one evening as they sat in Catherine's room, working on her wedding dress. "You mean being sold at auction?" Elizabeth clarified, her practical nature as evident as ever. "Yes," Catherine nodded. "How something so terrible could lead to something so wonderful." "I think about it often," Margaret admitted, setting aside her needlework. "How close we came to being separated to lives of, well, I try not to imagine what might have happened." "Owen saved us," Elizabeth said simply. "Not just from being sold, but from despair. He gave us work, purpose, dignity. And he gave Kate love," Margaret added with a smile. "That's the most precious gift of all." On Christmas Eve 1873, Catherine Walker became Catherine Blackburn in a simple ceremony at the Hayes City Church. She wore a cream-colored dress that she and her sisters had sewn together, with lace at the collar and cuffs that Mrs. Donovan had contributed from her own treasured keepsakes. Owen wore a new black suit, his usually wind-tousled hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven for the occasion. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for the holiday, the air fragrant with pine and beeswax candles. As Catherine walked down the aisle on Sheriff Davis's arm, he had offered to give her away in the absence of a father. She saw Owen waiting for her at the altar, his blue eyes filled with a love so powerful it took her breath away. Elizabeth stood as her maid of honor, with Margaret as bridesmaid, both wearing dresses of deep green that complemented the Christmas decorations. Daniel Torres, who had become Owen's most trusted hand, served as best man, looking uncomfortable but proud in his Sunday best. The minister spoke of love and commitment, of building a life together through good times and bad. When it came time for the vows, Owen's strong voice carried throughout the church as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Catherine for all his days. Catherine, in turn, pledged herself to Owen with a clarity and certainty that belied the tears shimmering in her eyes. "By the power vested in me," the minister concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Owen's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a perfect balance of public propriety and private passion. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Blackburn, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued at the ranch, where Mrs. Donovan had prepared a feast that would be remembered for years to come. The bunkhouse table had been moved into the house and extended to accommodate not only the ranch hands, but also friends from town, who had made the journey to share in the festivities. As evening fell, lanterns were lit and music began. Daniel Torres proved to be skilled with a fiddle, while one of the other hands played a harmonica. Owen led Catherine in the first dance, moving with a grace that surprised those who knew him only as the serious, hard-working rancher. "Happy, Mrs. Blackburn," he murmured as they swayed together. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," Catherine replied, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Later, as the celebration continued, Catherine found a moment alone with her sisters on the porch, the three of them wrapped in shawls against the winter chill. "I can hardly believe how our lives have changed," Margaret marveled, looking up at the star-filled sky. "6 months ago, we were facing separation and servitude. Now look at us. Kate's a married woman. I'm managing the accounts of one of the most prosperous ranches in the county, and you're turning into quite the gardener," Elizabeth summarized with a smile. "And we're still together," Catherine added softly. "That's what matters most." "Always," Margaret agreed, squeezing her hand. The sound of the door opening made them turn. Owen stood there, handsome in his wedding suit, a tender smile on his face as he looked at his bride and her sisters. "I don't mean to interrupt," he said, "but people are asking for the bride, and it's getting cold out here." "We were just having a moment of sisterly reflection," Catherine explained, going to his side. Owen's gaze encompassed all three women. "I want you to know," he said seriously, "that I meant what I said about this always being your home. All three of you belong here for as long as you want to stay." "Thank you, Owen," Elizabeth replied, her usual practicality softened by genuine emotion. "For everything." "Yes, thank you," Margaret echoed. "Not just for saving us, but for making Kate so happy." Owen shook his head. "No thanks needed. Having you all here has brought life back to this ranch. I'm the fortunate one." As they returned to the warmth and light of the celebration, Catherine reflected that this was what family truly meant, not just the bonds of blood that connected her to her sisters, but the bonds of love and choice that now connected all of them to Owen, and to this place they called home. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the household had retired, Catherine stood in the bedroom that would now be hers and Owen's. She had changed from her wedding dress into a fine nightgown that Elizabeth and Margaret had secretly made for her as a wedding gift, its soft white fabric embroidered with tiny blue flowers. When Owen entered, closing the door softly behind him, he stopped at the sight of her standing by the window, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. "Catherine," he breathed, crossing to her in 2 long strides. "My wife." "My husband," she replied, the words still new and wonderful on her tongue. His kiss was deeper now, unrestrained by the presence of others, and Catherine responded with equal passion. All the longing they had controlled during their courtship found expression at last, his hands gentle yet urgent as they explored her body through the thin fabric of her nightgown. "I love you," Owen murmured against her neck. "I think I began falling in love with you that day in Hayes City, when you stood on that platform with your head held high, protecting your sisters even in the face of such degradation." "And I love you," Catherine whispered back, "for seeing our worth when everyone else saw only our price." Their marriage was consummated with tenderness and passion, a joining that sealed their vows in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, as Catherine lay in Owen's arms, her head on his chest and his heartbeat strong beneath her ear, she felt a profound sense of peace and rightness. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. "That this is home," Catherine replied simply. "Not just this house or this ranch, but here with you. This is where I belong." Owen's arms tightened around her. "Yes," he agreed. "This is where we both belong." As winter gave way to spring, the Blackburn Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. Catherine stepped into her role as the rancher's wife with natural grace, balancing household management with her new responsibilities as Owen's partner in all things. Elizabeth continued to manage the accounts with increasing skill and independence, while Margaret's gardens expanded to include flowering borders that brightened the approach to the house. In April, Owen surprised Catherine with a trip to Kansas City to celebrate their 4-month anniversary. It was her first journey beyond Hays City since coming west, and the excitement of the train ride and the elegance of the hotel where they stayed created memories she would cherish forever. "I have something for you," Owen told her one evening in their hotel room, producing a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside, Catherine found a leather-bound journal, its pages blank and inviting. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "I thought you might like to write our story," Owen explained, "for future generations to know how we came together." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to Catherine's eyes. "Our future children, you mean?" Owen's expression softened. "Yes, and their children after them." He placed a gentle hand on her abdomen. "Perhaps sooner rather than later." Catherine covered his hand with her own. "Perhaps," she agreed with a smile, though she hadn't yet noticed any signs of pregnancy. "I would like that very much." "As would I," Owen said, drawing her into his arms. "A little girl with your courage and beauty, or a son with your intelligence and compassion. Or perhaps a daughter with your strength and integrity, or a son with your sense of honor," Catherine countered, leaning into his embrace. Upon their return to the ranch, life resumed its pleasant rhythm. Spring roundup kept Owen busy from dawn till dusk, while Catherine managed the household and began writing in the journal he had given her, recording their unusual love story for posterity. In June, Catherine's suspicions were confirmed by the local doctor. She was expecting a child, due in early January. The news was met with joy throughout the household. Owen's quiet pride was evident in the way he hovered protectively around Catherine, while her sisters were ecstatic at the prospect of becoming aunts. Mrs. Donovan immediately began knitting tiny garments, declaring that the ranch had waited too long for the sound of children's laughter. As Catherine's pregnancy progressed, Owen insisted she reduce her duties, bringing in additional help for the household. Catherine protested at first, but eventually conceded that the fatigue of pregnancy made some rest necessary. "I'm not an invalid, Owen," she reminded him one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching a summer thunderstorm roll across the prairie. "Of course not," he agreed, taking her hand. "But you're carrying our child. That's the most important work happening on this ranch right now." Catherine smiled, placing their joined hands on her growing belly. "Your son or daughter is quite active today. Feel." Owen's expression of wonder as he felt the baby kick never failed to melt Catherine's heart. This strong, capable man who had built a ranch from nothing and faced down danger without flinching was completely undone by the movements of their unborn child. "I never thought I would have this," he admitted quietly. "After Sarah died, I resigned myself to being alone. The ranch was enough, or so I told myself. And now," Catherine prompted. Owen's eyes, when they met hers, were filled with emotion. "Now I can't imagine life without you, without our family." The months passed in a haze of happiness and anticipation. In October, Elizabeth announced that she had received an offer to teach bookkeeping at the school in Hays City, working alongside Clara Turner. "I'll still manage your accounts, Owen," she assured her brother-in-law, "but I think I'd like to share what I've learned with others." "I think it's a wonderful opportunity," Owen replied sincerely. "You have a gift for numbers that shouldn't be limited to one ranch." Margaret, too, was finding her place. Her work in the gardens had attracted the attention of a neighboring rancher, who offered to pay her to design and plant gardens for his wife. Soon, Margaret was dividing her time between the Blackburn Ranch and consultation work for other properties, her natural talent blossoming into a respectable small business. As Christmas approached, marking the first anniversary of their wedding, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude. The previous Christmas had brought her the gift of marriage to Owen. This one would bring them a child, The baby arrived on January 2, 1875, after a long but uncomplicated labor. Owen paced anxiously outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Donovan and the midwife attended Catherine, with Elizabeth and Margaret providing additional support. "It's a boy," Margaret announced, bursting into the hallway with tears of joy streaming down her face. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Owen practically flew into the bedroom, where Catherine lay exhausted but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "We have a son," she said softly as Owen knelt beside the bed, his eyes filled with wonder as he gazed at the tiny, red-faced infant. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, gently touching the baby's hand, which immediately curled around his finger with surprising strength. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one, wanting to meet their child first. "William," Catherine suggested. "After my father, not as he was at the end, but as he was when I was a child. The father who taught me to ride and read and never give up." Owen nodded, understanding her wish to reclaim the good memories of her father. "William Owen Blackburn," he said, trying out the name. A strong name for a strong boy. The early months of 1875 were a blur of adapting to life with a newborn. Little William, or Will as they came to call him, had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was a good-natured baby, quick to smile and slow to cry, adored by his parents and aunts alike. As spring returned to the prairie, Catherine often sat on the porch with Will in her arms, watching Owen work with the horses in the corral, or listening to Margaret explain her latest gardening project. In these moments, the trauma of the auction block seemed like a distant nightmare, almost impossible to reconcile with the joy and security of her present life. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked one evening, joining her on the porch after a long day of work. He took Will from her arms, cradling their son with the natural ease that had surprised everyone when the baby was born. "About how far we've come," Catherine replied, watching her husband with their child. "About how the worst day of my life led to the best days I've ever known." Owen's expression grew serious. "I still think about that day, about what might have happened if I hadn't gone into town for supplies." "But you did," Catherine said firmly. "You were there when we needed you most, and you gave us choices when everyone else would have given us chains." Owen shifted Will to his shoulder, the baby's eyes already drooping with sleep. "I made the right choice that day, but you made the braver one. You chose to trust a stranger who bought you at auction." "I chose to hope," Catherine corrected gently, "and hope led us here." Later that evening, after Will had been put to bed, the family gathered in the parlor as had become their custom. Elizabeth shared news from her teaching, Margaret discussed plans for expanding the vegetable garden, and Owen mentioned a new breeding program he was considering for the herd. As Catherine looked around at the people she loved most in the world, her husband, their son sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, her sisters who had blossomed into confident, independent women, she felt a fullness of heart that defied description. This was what Owen had given them when he outbid those men in Hayes City, not just freedom from servitude, but the freedom to become their best selves, to build lives of purpose and joy. "I've been thinking," Owen said suddenly, interrupting Catherine's reflections. "The ranch has done well this past year, very well." He glanced at Elizabeth, who nodded confirmation. "I'd like to set up a fund." "What kind of fund?" Catherine asked. "For women in difficult circumstances," Owen explained. "Women who need a fresh start like you and your sisters did. We could offer employment, training, perhaps even small loans to help them establish businesses of their own." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes at the generosity of the proposal. "Owen, that's a wonderful idea." It was actually Elizabeth's suggestion, Owen acknowledged, nodding to his sister-in-law. She's seen too many women in town struggling with few options. There's a woman in Hayes City now, Elizabeth explained. Her husband was killed in a hunting accident, leaving her with 3 small children and no means of support. The bank is threatening to take her home. We could help her, Margaret said eagerly. She could live in one of the unused cabins until she gets back on her feet. The discussion continued late into the evening, plans taking shape for what would eventually become the Walker Sisters Fund, named in honor of the 3 women whose journey had inspired it. As Catherine prepared for bed that night, Owen came to stand behind her at the dressing table, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" he asked, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You have," Catherine smiled, "but I never tire of hearing it." Owen turned her to face him, his expression serious despite the tenderness in his eyes. "When I saw you on that auction block, I acted on instinct. I knew I couldn't let you and your sisters be separated and sold, but I never imagined how completely you would transform my life. And I never imagined that being bought would lead to being so completely free," Catherine replied, rising to wrap her arms around his neck. "Free to love, to work, to build something meaningful. To build a family," Owen added, drawing her closer. "Yes," Catherine agreed as their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion and promise of their future together. The most precious freedom of all. In the years that followed, the Blackburn Ranch prospered and expanded. William was joined by a sister, Sarah Catherine, born in the spring of 1877, and another brother, Joseph Thomas, who arrived in the summer of 1879. Elizabeth eventually married the new doctor in Hayes City, combining her teaching with helping him manage his practice. Margaret remained single by choice, developing a thriving business designing gardens for prosperous ranches and townhomes throughout the county. The Walker Sisters Fund helped dozens of women build new lives, some at the Blackburn Ranch itself, others in Hayes City or neighboring communities. It became Catherine's passion project, a way of transforming her own painful experience into hope for others.